911 operators. What's a call you'll never forget? There was one call that initially seemed pretty silly to me, but turned out to be quite serious. 911, where is your emergency? 121 Main Street. Okay, what's happening? I'd like to order a pizza. Ma'am, this is 911. Yes, I know. I'd like a large pizza with pepperoni, mushrooms, and peppers. Ma'am, you do realize you called 911, right? Yes. How long will it take? Okay, is everything all right with you? Do you have an emergency? Yes, I do. You can't talk about it because there's someone in the room with you? Moment of realization. That's correct. How long will the order take? We have an officer about a mile from you. Is there any weapon in your house? No. Can you stay on the line? No, thank you. See you soon. When we received the call, I checked the history at that address and saw that there had been several reports of domestic violence before. Upon arrival, the officer found a couple. The woman appeared to have been beaten, and the man was intoxicated. He was arrested after the woman revealed that he had been abusing her for some time. I think she was pretty clever to pull off that trick. It's definitely one of the most memorable calls. Wow, I hope all 911 operators have critical thinking skills as sharp as yours. Very impressive. Hats off to you. I would never have guessed what she was trying to say. Hey guys, I work as a 911 operator. The first call I ever answered was about a naked man sitting in a bathtub on the side of the road. Who knows where? It was in western Tennessee, for those curious. But the one that stands out the most for me was when I remotely assisted a deaf father in delivering a baby for his deaf wife. Intruders had broken into their home and tied them to chairs. When the burglars saw that the woman was about to give birth, they panicked and fled. It took the father several hours to free himself and call for help. While I was giving instructions, I got a description of the suspects and sent it out to neighboring departments. They were caught in the northern part of the city while I was still on the phone. The baby was born perfectly healthy. What have I missed? Since when do deaf people call on the phone? They use video calls and cameras to communicate with the translator. It's amazing and terrible at the same time. Amazing because it all ended well and they were saved. Terrible because such a situation even happened. I'm glad it ended well. A few years ago, I worked in a non-911 call center for an auto parts store. One day, a guy called asking for a part. I found the part number and placed the order, as I usually did. Then I heard him sigh and start to cry. Naturally, I asked if everything was okay. He responded, "You wouldn't want to hear about my problems, buddy." Being a kind person, I decided to help and said, "Of course, what happened?" Eventually, I was overwhelmed with emotions. It turned out that his wife suffered from ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and had recently passed away. He was repairing her car to sell it. He explained that her condition had progressed to the point where she couldn't walk, talk, or handle basic needs like dressing or showering. Eventually, she didn't even recognize him. Then the disease took her completely. He told me he had to move because he couldn't bear to stay in the house without his wife, and that he found 80,000 pounds in a drawer that didn't belong to him. He said he would probably donate it to charity. After a 50-minute conversation, he was so grateful that he asked for the company's address. I was new on the job and didn't realize the danger of sharing this information. On Christmas, I received a card from him, thanking me for taking the time to listen, and that it really helped him get through a tough time just by talking about it. So yes, he was a really nice guy, and I will remember him for the rest of my life because he deeply affected me with his story. You're amazing. A Harley motorcycle had flipped over, and the clutch lever was stuck in a 4-year-old's eye. The parents were on the line, asking what to do. Suddenly, the mother said they were going to flip the motorcycle over. I firmly told her to stop and wait for help. Eventually, rescuers sawed off the clutch lever and took the child to the hospital for surgery. It was in 1982. Just last year, I met the chief rescuer and the grown woman who was that child. They wanted to meet the 911 operator who saved her sight. If you're reading this comment, never pull an object out of a wound unless it's blocking the airway. That must be very touching. My wife sometimes wakes up in tears from dreams about calls like these. It's always either, "Mommy won't wake up," or, "I ran over my boy." She hasn't worked in 15 years. Some things just leave a mark. "I ran over my boy." Some things just leave tire marks. I wouldn't last a day in a 911 call center. Later, I had a similar call. An 8-year-old boy called saying his mom wouldn't wake up, and he couldn't tell if she was breathing. I tried to explain how to check. I still remember him sobbing on the phone, just saying, "Mommy," over and over because he was in shock. I felt like a complete jerk for keeping him in the room instead of getting him out of there. He shouldn't have had to see that. I take calls for the police. Here's one I can share. Sorry, but the reason we can't share a lot of real stories is confidentiality. Just yesterday, a very old and very proud German Canadian called on the non-emergency line. He spent 5 minutes straight talking about coming to Canada by boat before World War II and helping to settle here, his dislike for Harper, a former prime minister, building skyscrapers, being a plumber, etc., and didn't want to be interrupted. I just sat with my mic off, laughing my butt off. When I finally decided to get him off the line, he started singing, "Oh Canada," saying, "I love you all, I love this place." I worked as a 911 dispatcher for several years. One of my most memorable calls came from a hysterical woman. It was midnight, and there was a thunderstorm. She was speaking so incoherently that I couldn't understand anything. I kept saying, "Ma'am, you need to calm down. I can't understand you." This went on for what felt like forever. Our officers were already on their way to what was clearly a scary situation. Finally, she said something about her sister being with her. "How old is your sister?" I asked. "1," she replied. I immediately suspected something was off. "How old are you?" 5. It turned out to be a 5-year-old boy. So, I had inadvertently been calling a little boy, "Ma'am," for quite a while. Oops. The storm had woken him up, and his parents were missing. They had gone out to move their cars to shelter from the hail. He was just really scared. Our officers arrived and talked to the parents about not leaving sleeping children alone. Everyone was safe and sound. It wasn't the grimmest call, but I'll never forget it. Poor little guy. Great story. I never worked for 911, but I was a supervisor at a cellular call center. One time, while remotely monitoring our workers' calls, I came across a call that had been escalated to the second level of assistance. On the other end of the line was a woman, hysterical, reporting that her husband was trying to kill her. Following protocol, we had to trace the number to the local operator and notify law enforcement in that area. We attempted to do this, but we had no way to contact the local sheriff directly. I know it sounds dumb, but we weren't real operators, and our equipment didn't have that capability. Essentially, we had to act as intermediaries between the police and the victim on the line. By this time, I had left my office and sat next to the second-level operator to help out. Her name was April. She was handling the call well initially, but as time went on, she started to falter. Listening to the call with April, I tried to relay to the police what was happening. We heard the woman scream, "He's coming with an axe!" "Ma'am, where are you?" April asked. "I'm locked in the bathroom." "Please hurry," she replied. "The police are on their way," April said. "They're 5 minutes out." Then we heard loud banging. Her husband was trying to break through the door. April panicked as she heard the woman scream when her husband went for the axe. She took off her headset and walked to the restroom, saying something like, "I can't do this anymore." I took the headset and started calming the woman down. "Ma'am, the police are already in your house." "Where is your husband?" "He's at the bathroom door," she replied, her voice trembling. The sound of the axe got louder. The woman screamed and cried. Then we heard a voice shout, "This is the police!" "Drop the axe!" "This is the police!" "Drop the damn axe!" Pow, 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 pow. Shots were fired. The officers instructed me to ask the woman to open the bathroom door, which she did. Next, I heard the voice of the deputy sheriff over the phone. "This situation is under control. Operator, you can disconnect." I still get chills when I remember that. "Situation under control. Operator, you can disconnect." I apologize, but halfway through reading this, I imagined a scene from The Shining. Am I a bad person? Before my grandmother died, we had to call 911 to take her to the hospital. An elderly woman and an ambulance arrived at our house. For some reason, the woman struggled to climb the stairs to the front door and fell backward. She thought she hit her head because she touched it and saw blood on her hand. In reality, she just scraped her hands, but she thought the blood was from her head and fainted. We had to call another ambulance. I have a couple of stories like this, but one stands out above all others. I worked in a very busy city where shootings, rapes, robberies, and so on were unfortunately the norm. We were used to it. I had heard people die on the other end of the line during our conversations more than once. One time, a woman called. She said, "My husband has a gun to my head, and he won't leave me alone." She was screaming. Later, she dropped the phone. All I could hear were her screams and her shouting at her husband. "But I love you, baby." Then there was a boom, a gunshot. "But I love you." Boom, another gunshot. I stood up and yelled into my tiny microphone, "Stop telling him you love him." Everyone in the room turned and looked at me like I had 5 heads, but I was engrossed in the call. It turned out the man had found another guy in his woman's closet. The guy managed to escape, but the woman did not survive. Not me, but my sister is a dispatcher. One time she received a call from a man who said he just killed his sister and brother. She kept him on the phone for 5 or 6 minutes to make sure he didn't run before officers arrived. She got him to admit they had all been drinking and playing cards, then got into an argument when one of them accused the other of cheating. The other 2 went to bed, but this guy stayed up stewing. Apparently he couldn't let it go. He shot each of them in their beds while they slept, then called 911. I heard a partial recording of the call, and she sounded calm AF. She told me she was screaming on the inside the entire time. When we received the call, I checked the history at that address and saw that there had been several reports of domestic violence before. Upon arrival, the officer found a couple. The woman appeared to have been beaten, and the man was intoxicated. He was arrested after the woman revealed that he had been abusing her for some time. I think she was pretty clever to pull off that trick. It's definitely one of the most memorable calls. Wow, I hope all 911 operators have critical thinking skills as sharp as yours. Very impressive. Hats off to you. I would never have guessed what she was trying to say. A woman masturbating on the phone. The first time she called, she sounded normal at first. Asked for an officer that never worked here. General conversation about this officer, while she progressively got more extreme with her moaning. I eventually, and gracefully, ended the conversation. It was a wild time. I still remember her name and voice. The second and third time she called, I asked if it was her, and she hung up right away. Why are you like this, Ms. Roberts? What is your end game? Edit. For clarification, we traced the number down to a woman in Florida. We're located in Missouri, and our agency is tiny. Part of why I like this job. Hunting her down and bringing her to justice probably would have gotten her off, wouldn't have been worth the hassle. What have I missed? Since when do deaf people call on the phone? They use video calls and cameras to communicate with a translator. It's amazing and terrible at the same time. Amazing because it all ended well, and they were saved. Terrible because such a situation even happened. I'm glad it ended well. Thanks for watching. In the comments if you work in similar establishments. Tell me about your case, and don't forget to check out our other videos.